everyone. How are you all doing? Before we start today's radio broadcast, I have a small request. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you content like this. And one more thing. Where are you watching from and what time is it for you? Let us know in the comments section below. Now let's get started with today's broadcast. Good evening, listeners. This is Alex, broadcasting live to you from VoiceCast. We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you urgent breaking news. Moments ago, seismic activity was detected in multiple locations across the globe. Yes, across the globe, all at once. This is not a drill. This is not a localized event. What we are witnessing appears to be a global catastrophe in the making. Reports are pouring in from every corner of the world. The first tremors were recorded in Mexico City, where buildings swayed violently, glass shattering onto the streets below. Almost simultaneously, similar tremors were felt in Istanbul, where terrified residents flooded the streets, seeking safety from what appeared to be the wrath of the earth itself. And it doesn't stop there. Johannesburg, Berlin, Tokyo, Sydney, cities spanning every continent are reporting similar seismic activity. In Los Angeles, freeways have collapsed, crushing cars and cutting off vital arteries that connect communities. In Delhi, residents describe the ground beneath them rippling like water, sending shock waves of fear through crowded neighborhoods. Even places once considered geologically stable are not immune. Seismic monitors in Helsinki have detected activity, and the small town of Bismarck in North Dakota, of all places, is reporting tremors strong enough to knock over furniture and homes. This is unlike anything humanity has ever experienced. Early data shows no singular epicenter. Instead, tremors are being recorded simultaneously in multiple locations, a phenomenon that defies our current understanding of seismic activity. Experts are baffled, struggling to make sense of the data streaming in from around the world. I have just received a report from Jakarta, where a local journalist described scenes of chaos. The ground opened up in the middle of a crowded market square, swallowing stalls, goods, and even people. Entire buildings have toppled into the void left behind, while the air is thick with the cries of those trapped and the shouts of those desperately trying to rescue them. From Tokyo, the images are equally harrowing. Skyscrapers sway like blades of grass, and plumes of smoke rise against the neon-lit skyline. One eyewitness described the scene as the end of the world, with bridges collapsing into rivers and roads splitting apart like paper. This just in. Our newsroom has intercepted an emergency broadcast from New York City. Authorities are urging residents to stay indoors, away from windows and any structures that could collapse. There is a state of emergency declared in multiple regions, but communication lines are faltering, making coordination nearly impossible. I'm hearing reports of mass panic in São Paulo. Streets are gridlocked as people abandon their cars and flee on foot. Hospitals are overwhelmed with injuries caused by falling debris. Families are frantically searching for loved ones. In Nairobi, a local resident managed to call into our newsroom, their voice shaking as they describe buildings crumbling like sandcastles, leaving behind nothing but clouds of dust and despair. The caller ended with a plea for help, but their connection was lost before they could give more details. What is happening? How can earthquakes occur simultaneously across such vast distances? Scientists are already calling this event unprecedented, yet the scale and synchronicity of these tremors suggest that this is far more than a random act of nature. The question now lingering in everyone's mind is chilling. What is causing this? What lies beneath our feet, shifting and surging with such unimaginable force? Is this a harbinger of something even more catastrophic? Stay with us as we continue to gather real-time updates from around the world. We'll hear from experts who are already working to decode the mystery of these global tremors, and we'll bring you stories of survival, bravery, and resilience in the face of this unfolding disaster. For now, if you're in an affected area, seek shelter immediately. Avoid tall structures, bridges, or any unstable surfaces. Follow local emergency advisories and keep listening. The situation is rapidly escalating. Just when it seemed the worst was over, powerful aftershocks are now rippling across regions that were already devastated. And new areas, untouched just hours ago, are reporting seismic activity of increasing intensity. The city of San Francisco, already reeling from a magnitude 7.8 earthquake, has just been hit by another series of aftershocks. These tremors have caused catastrophic damage to what little infrastructure remained intact. Iconic landmarks like the Golden Gate Bridge are now barely holding together, with reports suggesting sections of the bridge have collapsed into the bay. Emergency crews are frantically working to rescue those stranded on the structure, but rising water levels from ruptured pipelines are complicating their efforts. In Shanghai, where the initial tremors had already wreaked havoc, the city now faces complete chaos. Entire residential blocks have collapsed like stacks of cards. A resident who managed to call in described the terrifying moment when an aftershock struck. It felt like the ground was being ripped apart beneath us. I saw buildings falling one after another. People were screaming, running, but there was nowhere to go. I grabbed my daughter and ran, but the streets are filled with rubble. We're trapped. The damage isn't confined to urban centers. In rural Nepal, massive landslides triggered by the tremors have wiped out entire villages. Roads leading to these areas are either destroyed or blocked, making it impossible for emergency services to reach the affected populations. A local farmer shared his ordeal over a radio relay. We could hear the rumbling coming down the mountains. Trees, rocks, everything. It was like the earth was swallowing us whole. My family and I ran as fast as we could, but I don't know how many of my neighbors made it. In Brazil, the Amazon region has been struck by unexpected seismic activity. Indigenous communities deep in the forest are reportedly cut off entirely, their survival uncertain. Local authorities are attempting to deploy rescue teams, but communication lines are down, and landslides have made travel nearly impossible. As we piece together this growing puzzle, scientists are no closer to understanding why these earthquakes are occurring simultaneously across the globe. Dr. Amelia Carter, a renowned seismologist from the University of Cambridge, joined us earlier with this troubling update. This level of tectonic activity, spread so broadly and in such a coordinated fashion, defies everything we know about the Earth's crust. Normally, stress along fault lines is localized, but what we're seeing now suggests a domino effect. Fault lines interacting with one another on a scale that's never been observed before. It's as if the planet is experiencing a total geological breakdown. But science offers little comfort to those on the ground, living through this nightmare. Earlier, I received a harrowing first-hand account from a subway passenger in New York City. She was traveling on the Uptown line when the tremors began. We were between stations when it started. The train screeched to a halt, and everything went dark. Then I heard this horrible groaning sound, metal twisting, breaking. People were screaming, holding on to each other. Someone said the tunnel might collapse. I thought I was going to die right there underground. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life before the emergency lights came on, and they told us to evacuate. But when we climbed out of the subway, it was like stepping into a war zone. The buildings above ground were just gone. Meanwhile, the emotional toll on families is unimaginable. In Istanbul, a young boy separated from his parents during the chaos managed to find a rescue worker. Through tears, he described his fear. I was holding my mother's hand, but she let go when the crowd pushed us. I tried to find her, but everyone was running. I don't know where she is. I'm scared she's hurt. In Sydney, similar scenes of devastation are unfolding. The Sydney Harbour Bridge has sustained heavy damage, and parts of the Opera House have collapsed. Hospitals are overwhelmed. with injured residents lining the hallways and waiting rooms. A doctor on the front lines painted a grim picture. We're doing everything we can, but the number of casualties keeps rising. Supplies are running low, and there's no telling when we'll get more. It's heartbreaking to tell someone we can't save their loved one because we just don't have the resources. The cascading effects of these earthquakes are stretching governments and emergency responders to their limits. In Italy, aftershocks in Rome have caused centuries-old monuments to crumble, burying streets under piles of debris. Rescue teams are working tirelessly, but the scale of the destruction is daunting. A firefighter described his struggle. You want to save everyone, but the reality is we're digging through rubble with our bare hands. It's not enough. It's never enough. Despite these dire circumstances, stories of heroism and resilience are beginning to emerge. In Los Angeles, a group of strangers banded together to rescue an elderly man trapped under a fallen beam. One of the rescuers, visibly shaken but determined, said, "We couldn't just leave him there. We worked together, and somehow we got him out." It's moments like these that remind you what humanity is capable of. But for every story of hope, there are countless more of despair. The earthquakes continue to spread, affecting regions that were thought to be safe. Reports now suggest that areas of the Arctic Circle are experiencing tremors, with research stations struggling to keep their structures intact amidst the unrelenting shaking. As night falls in some parts of the world, the fear of what the darkness might bring weighs heavily. Many are too afraid to sleep indoors, opting instead to stay in open fields or parks despite the cold. Others huddle in makeshift shelters, waiting for the next tremor, unsure if their world will still be standing come morning. Listeners, we are living through an event that will undoubtedly reshape our understanding of the planet and its fragility. The scale of destruction is unimaginable, and the human cost continues to rise. We will remain here broadcasting every update, every story of survival, and every step toward understanding the catastrophe unfolding around us. Stay safe, hold your loved ones close, and pray for those who can't. This is Alex, reporting live. Ladies and gentlemen, as the world trembles under the relentless force of these unprecedented earthquakes, the question everyone is asking remains unanswered. What is causing this global phenomenon? Experts from various fields are working tirelessly to decode the mystery. But early theories paint a troubling picture of what may be happening beneath our feet. The leading hypothesis emerging from the scientific community is the possibility of a tectonic chain reaction. Dr. Emilia Carter, a seismologist from the University of Cambridge, explains, "Imagine a row of dominoes set up along the Earth's fault lines. One significant seismic event, a tectonic push, could destabilize adjacent plates, triggering activity across vast distances." She goes on to elaborate that this scenario is highly rare, but not entirely unheard of. Historically, large earthquakes have occasionally caused stress transfers to neighboring fault lines, but what we are witnessing now far exceeds anything recorded in modern history. The scale of these earthquakes suggests that the Earth's crust may be undergoing a massive, simultaneous shift. The Earth's tectonic plates are in constant slow motion, drifting atop a layer of molten rock known as the mantle. Occasionally, these plates collide, slide past, or move away from each other, causing the familiar tremors we classify as earthquakes. However, for such widespread activity to occur, there must be an extraordinary force at work. Adding to the complexity, other theories are being considered. Some experts speculate that human activity might have inadvertently contributed to this disaster. Dr. Anil Mehta, a geophysicist, raises the possibility of underground nuclear tests destabilizing fault lines. "We know that deep underground detonations create shock waves," he explains. "If such tests were conducted near fault zones, they could have acted as a trigger, setting off a chain of seismic events that escalated beyond control." While no concrete evidence has surfaced linking recent human activity to the earthquakes, the mere suggestion is enough to spark heated debate. Another theory gaining traction involves a possible meteor strike. Scientists are analyzing satellite data for signs of an impact, which might have sent shockwaves through the Earth's crust. This idea stems from historical events like the Chicxulub meteor strike, which not only caused mass extinctions but also left a geological scar visible to this day. While no direct evidence of a recent meteor strike has yet been found, researchers are not ruling it out. Still, others point to mysterious geological events as the root cause. Deep below the surface, processes we barely understand could be unfolding. Volcanic activity in the Earth's mantle, fluctuations in magnetic fields, or even the movement of subterranean fluids might be contributing factors. These theories, while speculative, highlight how much remains unknown about the inner workings of our planet. Amidst these discussions, one alarming possibility looms large: superquakes. These are earthquakes of such immense magnitude that they not only devastate entire regions, but also permanently alter the Earth's geography. Dr. Carter warns the current activity we're seeing could very well be a precursor to superquakes. These are the events that create mountain ranges, sink islands, and change coastlines forever. If a superquake is triggered, the world we know may never look the same. The implications of a superquake are terrifying. Imagine entire cities disappearing into the ocean as coastlines sink, or new land masses rising where none existed before. Historical evidence shows that such events have occurred in the distant past, shaping the continents we live on today. While humanity has never experienced a superquake in recorded history, the mere possibility is enough to send shockwaves through every corner of the globe. Experts are racing against time to gather data, run simulations, and understand the forces at play. However, as Dr. Mehta points out, the Earth is a dynamic system, and sometimes its mechanisms defy prediction. What we do know is that this is not over. The tremors we're feeling now may just be the beginning. As we await further insights, the world watches with bated breath. Each tremor a stark reminder of how fragile our existence on this planet truly is. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you updates and explore what the future holds for a world on edge. As scientists work around the clock to uncover the causes of this global seismic catastrophe, their efforts are beginning to yield critical insights, though the answers raise as many questions as they resolve. We turn now to the voices of leading experts who are at the forefront of this investigation. Dr. Alan Reyes, a renowned seismologist, provided a sobering assessment in an interview earlier today. What we're observing is an unprecedented level of unpredictability in the Earth's fault lines. These fractures in the planet's crust, which typically move in predictable patterns based on stress accumulation, are now behaving erratically. It's as if the entire system has gone haywire. He went on to explain that fault lines across the globe appear to be interacting in a way that defies conventional understanding. When one fault moves, it releases stress. Normally, this stress is absorbed by neighboring regions over time. But what we're seeing now suggests a kind of resonance effect. Energy from one quake seems to amplify movement in distant faults, even those previously considered dormant. It's as if the planet's crust is vibrating in unison. Dr. Reyes' analysis highlights the sheer complexity of the Earth's tectonic system, where even minor imbalances can lead to catastrophic consequences. Yet, as we piece together these scientific clues, we are reminded that this is not the first time our planet has experienced geological upheaval on such a scale. Dr. Miriam Kwan, a leading geologist and historian of Earth's tectonic activity, draws comparisons to past superquakes that shaped the world we live in today. The splitting of the ancient supercontinent Pangaea, for example, was driven by tectonic forces of unimaginable magnitude. Entire land masses were torn apart, creating the continents we now recognize. She continued, While that event occurred over millions of years, there is evidence of more sudden catastrophic events in Earth's history. One example is the Toba supervolcanic eruption roughly 74,000 years ago, which triggered massive earthquakes and reshaped the surrounding region. If the current activity is of a similar scale, we are looking at a global transformation, both geologically and socially. The notion of transformation is not lost on those living through the disaster today. While scientists grapple with theories and data, individuals on the ground are experiencing the immediate devastating impacts of these quakes. Their stories remind us of the human cost of these scientific phenomena. Dr. Kwan also emphasized the potential long-term implications of these events. If this level of seismic activity continues, we may see entire ecosystems disrupted. Coastal regions could submerge permanently, mountain ranges could rise, and fault lines could create new rift valleys. Humanity will have to adapt to a world that may look very different from the one we've known. Adding to the complexity, some researchers have pointed to potential links between these seismic events and climate change. While the direct connection is still under investigation, the melting of glaciers and rising sea levels could be influencing tectonic stress in unexpected ways. Dr. Reyes addressed this in his interview. As glaciers melt, they release pressure on the Earth's crust, a process known as isostatic rebound. This can destabilize fault lines in certain regions. While it's too early to say definitively, we cannot ignore the possibility that human activity is indirectly contributing to this crisis. Meanwhile, back in the research labs, geologists are studying ancient records of earthquakes to find parallels that might guide their understanding of what is happening today. Dr. Kwan offered this reflection. Throughout history, the Earth has demonstrated its power to create and destroy. What we are experiencing now is a stark reminder of our place in a vast, ever-changing system. While we may understand the mechanics of these events, predicting them with precision remains one of science's greatest challenges. For now, the questions outnumber the answers. What triggered these interconnected quakes? How long will this phenomenon last? And most importantly, how can humanity prepare for the potential changes to come? Scientists are working tirelessly to provide clarity, but as they unravel the mysteries of the Earth's inner workings, it is clear that the road ahead will be fraught with uncertainty. As the world reels under the catastrophic effects of the ongoing earthquakes, governments across the globe are stepping into action, scrambling to manage a crisis of unimaginable proportions. The response has been swift but chaotic, with nations issuing emergency orders, deploying military forces, and delivering emotional addresses to a terrified global populace. Despite their efforts, the sheer scale of this disaster has left even the most prepared nations struggling to maintain order and protect their citizens. In the United States, President James Whitaker addressed the nation from the White House's Emergency Operations Center, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "My fellow Americans," he began, "our nation, and indeed the world, faces a crisis unlike any we have known. I urge you to remain calm, to look after one another, and to follow the directives of emergency responders in your area. Together, we will endure this, and together, we will rebuild." His words were broadcast on every major network and streamed live to millions of Americans huddled in their homes or makeshift shelters, clinging to any sense of stability. Following the address, the U.S. government declared a state of national emergency, mobilizing all available resources to assist affected regions. The National Guard was deployed to states hit hardest by the earthquakes, including California, where aftershocks continue to devastate cities. Military convoys are transporting medical supplies, food, and water to overwhelmed hospitals and shelters. In Los Angeles, soldiers worked alongside firefighters to clear debris from collapsed freeways and search for survivors buried under the rubble. Across the Atlantic, European leaders issued similar calls for unity and action. In France, President Elodie Durand addressed her citizens, her voice breaking as she described the devastation in Paris and other cities. "We are facing a moment of unparalleled difficulty," she said, "but I am inspired by the courage of our first responders, the resilience of our citizens, and the unwavering determination to rebuild what has been lost." France has declared martial law in several regions to prevent looting and maintain order as emergency services race to provide aid. Meanwhile, in Asia, India's Prime Minister Arjun Malhotra has launched Operation Sahyog, a nationwide initiative to coordinate rescue and relief efforts. Specially trained disaster response teams have been airlifted to areas cut off by landslides and infrastructure collapse, while the Indian Air Force is using helicopters to deliver food and medicine to remote villages in the Himalayas. In Japan, a nation all too familiar with seismic disasters, Prime Minister Keiko Sato urged her people to draw on their collective resilience. "We have faced calamity before," she said, referencing the devastating earthquake and tsunami of 2011. "And we will rise again, stronger and more united than ever." While government responses have varied in effectiveness, the overwhelming nature of the disaster has exposed gaps in even the most robust systems. In some countries, particularly those with limited resources, the situation has reached a breaking point. Reports from African nations, including Kenya and Ethiopia, reveal that governments are struggling to provide basic necessities like food, clean water, and shelter to millions of displaced people. In many regions, international aid organizations have stepped in to fill the void, but logistical challenges, including damaged roads and airports, have slowed the flow of critical supplies. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, Secretary General Ana Perez convened an emergency session to address the global crisis. "This is not a regional issue. This is a test of our shared humanity," she declared. "The United Nations has pledged to mobilize resources from member nations to assist the most vulnerable regions, focusing on providing emergency shelter, medical care, and clean drinking water. However, the scale of the task is daunting, and time is running out for those trapped in the most remote and hardest hit areas. Governments are also relying heavily on technology to coordinate their responses. Satellite imagery is being used to assess damage and identify areas in urgent need of aid, while social media platforms are being leveraged to communicate with citizens and disseminate emergency information. In some cases, these tools have proven invaluable. In Canada, for example, an app developed by the government has allowed citizens to report their locations and immediate needs, helping first responders prioritize their efforts. Despite these efforts, the cracks in global coordination are beginning to show. With so many nations affected, resources are stretched thin, and the competition for aid is creating tensions among allies. The European Union has pledged solidarity among its member states, but reports suggest that some countries are prioritizing their own citizens over those of neighboring nations. In the United States, similar concerns are emerging, with some state governments accusing federal agencies of neglecting their regions in favor of more politically influential areas. Still, amidst the chaos, moments of unity and leadership shine through. In New Zealand, Prime Minister Olivia Hart announced that her government would be providing disaster relief funds not only for its citizens, but also for neighboring Pacific Island nations struggling with the aftermath of the earthquakes. "We are all in this together," she said, "and we will extend a helping hand to anyone in need." The global response to this crisis is a testament to both the strengths and weaknesses of humanity's preparedness for such events. Governments are doing their best to rise to the challenge, but the road ahead is long, and the cracks in the system are undeniable. As this disaster continues to unfold, the resilience and cooperation of nations will be tested like never before. While governments race to coordinate large-scale relief efforts, The public response to the crisis has been a mixture of panic, resilience, and extraordinary acts of humanity. Across the globe, citizens are grappling with the immediate realities of survival, each region revealing unique challenges and stories of both despair and hope. In major cities, the initial response to the earthquakes was one of sheer panic. Grocery stores and supermarkets were flooded with frantic shoppers, stripping shelves bare of essentials like bottled water, canned goods, and medical supplies. In New York City, lines stretched for blocks as residents tried to stock up, fearing further aftershocks. One store owner described the scene. It was chaos. People were grabbing whatever they could carry. It didn't matter if they needed it or not. The fear was palpable. Similar scenes unfolded in cities like Tokyo, Paris, and Rio de Janeiro, where panic buying left countless families without access to basic necessities. Shelters quickly became overcrowded as displaced families sought refuge. In Istanbul, an emergency shelter set up in a sports arena was filled beyond capacity within hours. Volunteers worked tirelessly to distribute blankets, food, and water, but supplies ran out long before the demand was met. Despite the grim circumstances, stories of solidarity began to emerge. A group of university students organized a makeshift kitchen to provide hot meals for families using donated ingredients and borrowed equipment. One volunteer shared, "In moments like this, you realize how much we depend on each other. We don't know these people, but they're our neighbors now." Social media has played a critical role in documenting the crisis, offering a window into the devastation while also serving as a platform for hope. Videos of collapsing buildings and rescue efforts have gone viral, garnering millions of views within hours. While some posts highlight the destruction, others showcase acts of heroism and kindness. In one widely shared clip, a group of strangers in Mexico City formed a human chain to pull a woman and her child from the rubble of their home. The video's caption read, "We are stronger together." Amid the chaos, first responders have emerged as true heroes, putting their lives on the line to save others. In Los Angeles, firefighter Miguel Herrera recounted a harrowing rescue mission in the aftermath of a collapsed apartment building. "We could hear voices coming from under the debris," he said. "It was dangerous. There were still aftershocks, but we couldn't leave them there. We worked for hours, cutting through concrete and steel, and we managed to pull out a mother and her 2 children. That moment, when they were finally free, made all the risk worth it." In rural areas where resources are scarce, the public response has been one of self-reliance and community effort. In a small village in Nepal, residents used whatever tools they could find, shovels, sticks, even their bare hands, to dig through the rubble of their homes. A local farmer described the experience. "We don't have machines or trained rescuers here, it's just us. But we can't wait for help to come. We have to save our own." Stories like these highlight the resilience of people in the face of unimaginable hardship. Among the most poignant tales are those of educators and caregivers who put the safety of others above their own. In a school in Delhi, teacher Ananya Kapoor led her students to safety moments before the building collapsed. When the shaking started, the children were terrified. Some froze in fear, others cried for their parents. She recounted, "I told them to hold hands and stay together. We ran as fast as we could to the open field behind the school. We were lucky. If we'd waited even a minute longer, I don't think we would have made it." Her bravery saved the lives of 30 children, but she remains haunted by the thought of those who didn't survive. The emotional toll on families separated by the disaster is immense. In Sao Paulo, 9-year-old Felipe was found wandering alone in a crowded shelter. He told volunteers that he had been separated from his parents when their apartment building collapsed. "I don't know where they are," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I just want to go home." His story is one of thousands, as families across the globe struggle to reunite amid the chaos. Despite the devastation, moments of hope and humanity shine through. In Nairobi, a community choir performed for displaced families in a shelter, singing songs of resilience and faith. One listener described the experience. For a moment, we forgot the pain, the fear. We were just people together, holding on to hope. Acts like these remind us of the unbreakable spirit that persists even in the darkest times. Social media continues to serve as both a lifeline and a source of inspiration. Hashtags like #Global Rescue and #Stronger Together are trending worldwide, with users sharing resources, coordinating relief efforts, and offering messages of support. In one remarkable instance, a woman in Canada connected with her family in Turkey through a social media post after losing contact during the earthquake. "I didn't know if they were alive," she said. "Then I saw a picture someone shared of my sister in a shelter. It was the happiest moment of my life. As the world grapples with this disaster, it is clear that the response from ordinary people is as vital as that of governments and organizations. From acts of heroism to simple gestures of kindness, the public's resilience and compassion are a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Even as the ground beneath us continues to tremble, humanity stands firm, united in the face of adversity. As the earthquakes continue to wreak havoc across the globe, their cascading effects are pushing societies to the brink of collapse. The trembling ground has not only toppled buildings and torn apart cities, but also dismantled the very systems that sustain daily life. The collapse of critical infrastructure is now amplifying the devastation, leaving millions in the dark without water and cut off from communication with the outside world. Power outages are sweeping across continents as electrical grids buckle under the strain of the disaster. In the United States, vast stretches of the Midwest and West Coast are without electricity. Major cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, already battered by relentless aftershocks, have plunged into darkness. Hospitals are relying on backup generators to power life-saving equipment, but fuel shortages are raising fears that even these temporary solutions will fail. In Europe, entire nations are grappling with similar challenges. Italy's power grid, heavily dependent on aging infrastructure, has collapsed in multiple regions, leaving millions without electricity. Residents in Naples describe the eerie silence of their once vibrant city, now cloaked in darkness. "You don't realize how much you depend on electricity until it's gone," one resident shared. "No lights, no heat, no way to contact loved ones. It's like we've been thrown back into the Stone Age." The lack of clean water is compounding the crisis. In many cities, water treatment plants have been damaged or destroyed, leaving residents to rely on bottled water, if they can find it. In Jakarta, Indonesia, contaminated water sources are causing outbreaks of illness in overcrowded shelters. "We can survive without power, but not without water," said a local aid worker. "The situation is critical, and we are running out of options." Communication blackouts are further isolating communities. In parts of Africa and South America, where infrastructure was already fragile, the earthquakes have severed fiber optic cables and destroyed cell towers. Families are left in agonizing uncertainty, unable to reach loved ones or access emergency information. In Kenya, a mother searching for her son described her anguish. "I've called his phone 100 times, but there's no signal. I don't know if he's alive or hurt. The waiting is unbearable." Transportation networks, the lifelines of modern society, have been brought to a standstill. Airports are closed, their runways cracked and unusable. In Mexico City, authorities have grounded all flights after tremors caused significant structural damage to the main terminal. Ports, critical for global trade, are similarly incapacitated. In Singapore, one of the busiest ports in the world, shipping operations have halted as cranes and containers lie in disarray. The disruption of these vital hubs is rippling across the global economy, creating shortages of essential goods and raw materials. Roads and railways are equally devastated. In India, landslides triggered by the earthquakes have buried major highways, cutting off entire regions from relief efforts. Train services are suspended as tracks have been twisted beyond repair. A commuter in Mumbai described the surreal sight. It's as if the earth picked up the tracks and dropped them back in random places. Trains won't be running here for months, maybe years. The cascading failures of these systems are having a profound impact on trade and commerce, plunging the global economy into turmoil. Stock markets have nosedived as investors panic, fearing that the world's supply chains may take years to recover. The New York Stock Exchange experienced its steepest single-day drop in history, while markets in London, Tokyo, and Hong Kong have followed suit. This is a crisis like no other, said financial analyst Mark Hargrove. The interconnected nature of our economies means that no country is immune. What happens in one part of the world affects us all. Inflation is skyrocketing as shortages of food, fuel, and other essentials drive prices to unprecedented levels. In Buenos Aires, a loaf of bread now costs 3 times what it did just days ago. We can't afford to eat, lamented a father of 3. My children are hungry, and there's nothing I can do. Similar stories are emerging from markets in Lagos, Nairobi, and Manila, where long lines of desperate residents are forming in front of dwindling supplies. The collapse of infrastructure is also straining the social fabric of communities. In many regions, the lack of basic services has led to a breakdown of order, with protests and riots erupting as citizens demand answers and resources. In Paris, angry crowds have gathered outside government buildings, accusing officials of neglect and mismanagement. Police in riot gear are struggling to maintain control, their efforts hampered by the chaos that surrounds them. The economic ramifications of this unprecedented disaster are becoming more apparent by the hour. Global markets are in free fall as the destruction disrupts trade and commerce on an unimaginable scale. Major industries are paralyzed, from manufacturing plants in China to tech hubs in Silicon Valley. Supply chains that once moved seamlessly across borders are now fractured, leaving businesses unable to deliver products and services. The collapse of these systems is triggering widespread layoffs, adding to the already dire situation for millions of workers worldwide. In Tokyo, one of the world's largest financial centers, the stock market closed early after a record-breaking plunge wiped out trillions in value. Traders describe the atmosphere as pure panic, with no clear end in sight. We're seeing the domino effect of a global economy dependent on fragile systems, said economist Clara Bishop. When those systems collapse, the ripple effects touch everyone, from the wealthiest corporations to the smallest street vendors. In developing nations where economic margins are razor thin, the situation is even more dire. Inflation is spiraling out of control, making basic necessities unaffordable for the average citizen. In Dhaka, Bangladesh, the price of rice has doubled in less than a week, leaving families struggling to feed themselves. We don't know how long we can survive like this, said a mother of 4. Everything costs more, but we earn the same, or nothing at all, because there's no work. As the economic strain deepens, tensions are boiling over into widespread social unrest. Protests and riots have erupted in cities around the globe, with citizens demanding action and accountability from their leaders. In Cairo, crowds gathered in Tahrir Square, chanting slogans against the government's perceived failure to provide aid. The protest began peacefully, but quickly escalated as frustrated citizens clashed with police. Similar scenes are playing out in cities like Caracas, Johannesburg, and Jakarta, where desperation and anger have reached a breaking point. Religious groups have also seized on the disaster, interpreting it as a divine warning or even the end of days. In Manila, large gatherings of worshipers have formed in public squares, praying for salvation and urging others to repent. This is a test from God, said one preacher addressing a crowd. we must turn away from our sins and seek His mercy. While these gatherings provide solace to some, they also pose challenges for authorities trying to maintain order and prevent the spread of disease in crowded conditions. The emotional toll of the disaster is perhaps the most profound. For individuals and families, the earthquakes have brought an overwhelming sense of loss, not just of homes and possessions, but of loved ones, security, and hope for the future. In every corner of the world, people are grappling with the psychological weight of a reality they never imagined. In Istanbul, 14-year-old Aylin sits in a shelter with her younger brother, clutching a photo of their parents, who are still missing. They told us to leave the building when the shaking started, she said, her voice trembling. I held my brother's hand and ran, but my parents, they didn't make it out. I don't know if they're alive. Her story is one of countless others, as families are torn apart by the chaos. In San Francisco, first responder Jacob Morales described the emotional challenges of his work. We're trained to save lives, to be strong, but this is something else. Every time we pull someone from the rubble, there's a moment of relief, but then you see the faces of those still waiting for their loved ones, and you know you can't save them all. It's heartbreaking. Despite the despair, moments of resilience and hope continue to shine through. In a small village in Nepal, residents have formed a close-knit community, pooling their resources and working together to rebuild. One elder shared, "We've lost so much, but we haven't lost each other. As long as we have that, we can start again." Children, often the most vulnerable in times of crisis, are also showing incredible strength. In Mexico City, a group of young survivors has started a makeshift school in their shelter, with older children teaching younger ones how to read and write. "We want things to feel normal again," said 12-year-old Sophia, who has taken on the role of teacher. "Even if everything outside is broken, we can still learn and dream." As the world grapples with the societal breakdown caused by these earthquakes, it is clear that the road to recovery will be long and arduous. The destruction has revealed both the fragility and the resilience of human society, a stark reminder of how interconnected we are and how much we depend on one another. A global disaster that has pushed people to the edge of survival. Amid the devastation, the world's collective response is defined by tireless effort, unyielding resilience, and a determination to endure. Rescue teams have become the lifeline of countless communities, working around the clock to save lives in conditions that grow more perilous with each passing hour. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, a team of firefighters is racing against time to pull survivors from a collapsed apartment building. The head of the team, Captain Marco Silva, described their mission. "We can still hear voices from under the rubble. They're weak, but they're there. Every second counts, and we're not giving up until we get them out." One rescue operation in Istanbul, Turkey, captured a global attention when a team managed to save a 3-year-old girl trapped for 36 hours beneath the debris of her home. "She was crying softly when we found her," said one rescuer. "It was a miracle she survived, but she held on. That little girl's spirit is stronger than anything I've ever seen." Stories like hers are a testament to the human will to survive, even in the direst circumstances. The heroism extends beyond the rescue teams to ordinary citizens who are stepping up in extraordinary ways. In Kathmandu, Nepal, a local mountaineer used his climbing equipment to help rescue his neighbors trapped in a collapsed school. "The ground kept shaking," he said, "but we couldn't leave them there. We tied ropes and climbed into the ruins. We saved 7 children that day. It was the proudest moment of my life." Meanwhile, hospitals and medical facilities around the world are overwhelmed as they struggle to cope with the sheer number of injured. In Los Angeles, makeshift triage centers have been set up in parking lots and parks to handle the overflow of patients. Doctors and nurses, many of whom haven't slept in days, are working tirelessly to save as many lives as they can. Dr. Maria Vasquez, an ER physician in Mexico City, described the scene. We're seeing everything: broken bones, head injuries, burns. The hardest part is having to decide who gets immediate care and who has to wait. It's a decision no doctor should ever have to make, but there's no other way. All we can do is keep going. In many cases, communities themselves are stepping in to fill the gaps where formal systems have failed. In a small town in Italy, residents have banded together to create a communal kitchen, pooling whatever food and supplies they can find. We don't have much, said a local baker, but we're sharing what we have. In times like these, it's the only way to survive. In rural India, a group of farmers has converted a local temple into a shelter for displaced families. The temple's caretakers shared, "This place is sacred, but so are the lives of these people. They've lost everything, and it's our duty to help them rebuild." Amid these efforts, moments of suspense and danger continue to unfold. In Shanghai, a group of survivors is making their way through a collapsing cityscape in search of safety. Led by a retired military officer, they navigate treacherous streets littered with debris, dodging falling structures and avoiding ruptured gas lines. One survivor, Mei Lin, described the journey. "We didn't know if we would make it. The ground kept shaking, and buildings were crumbling around us, but we had to keep moving. Staying still wasn't an option." In another part of the world, a family in Istanbul has taken refuge in an underground shelter after their home was destroyed. The father, Ahmed, recounts their ordeal. "The air is damp, and it's cold down here. We don't know what's happening above ground. Every sound, every tremor makes us wonder if the worst is yet to come. But at least we're together. That's what keeps us going. Despite the danger, the human spirit persists." In Nairobi, Kenya, a group of musicians in a shelter began playing songs of hope and unity, lifting the spirits of those around them. "Music heals," said one of the performers. "Even in times like this, it reminds us that we're alive, that there's something worth fighting for." In Tokyo, a school teacher named Hiroshi Yamamoto has become a beacon of hope for his community. After ensuring the safety of his students, he began organizing efforts to distribute supplies and check on elderly residents in his neighborhood. "We can't control the earthquakes," he said, "but we can control how we respond to them. Helping others gives us strength. The world is witnessing a struggle for survival that is as much about resilience as it is about endurance. Each act of bravery, each story of compassion is a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity has the capacity to shine. The road to recovery will be long, but with determination and unity, it is a road that will be traveled. The earthquakes have left scars on the planet's surface, scars that will take decades, if not centuries, to heal. But as scientists work to understand the long-term implications, the emerging picture is one of profound transformation. Experts warn that the planet itself may never look the same. Dr. Alan Reyes, the seismologist, who has been providing critical insights throughout this crisis, shared his thoughts on the future of Earth's geography. "We're seeing unprecedented shifts in the Earth's crust," he said. "Entire fault systems are reconfiguring themselves. Mountain ranges may rise where none existed before, and coastal areas are at risk of sinking beneath the sea. These changes are not temporary, they are permanent. Satellite imagery confirms the dramatic alterations already underway. In Southeast Asia, new land masses are forming as tectonic plates collide and push the seabed upward. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, small islands have been swallowed by rising waters as their foundations crumble. This is geology in real time," Dr. Reyes added. "It's both fascinating and terrifying. The potential climate impacts are equally alarming. As fault lines shift, they may trigger volcanic activity on a scale not seen in millennia." Dr. Miriam Kwan, a geologist specializing in Earth's historical catastrophes, explained the risks. Volcanic eruptions release massive amounts of ash and gases into the atmosphere, which can block sunlight and lead to a temporary cooling of the planet, a phenomenon known as a volcanic winter. If multiple eruptions occur, the consequences could be catastrophic for agriculture and ecosystems. Governments around the globe are beginning to outline their plans for recovery, though the scale of the task ahead is daunting. In the United States, President Whitaker announced a multi-phase rebuilding initiative, focusing on restoring critical infrastructure and providing long-term housing for the displaced. This will be the greatest rebuilding effort in our nation's history, he said in a televised address. It will take time, resources, and the collective effort of every American, but we will rebuild. In Europe, the European Union has pledged to create a unified disaster response fund, pooling resources from member states to rebuild affected regions. This is not just about repairing what was lost, said EU President Elena Marquez. It's about reimagining our future, building stronger, more resilient communities that can withstand the challenges ahead. Yet, for many nations, hope remains scarce. In developing countries where resources are already stretched thin, the path to recovery seems almost insurmountable. International aid organizations are stepping in to provide immediate relief, but the long-term rebuilding process will require far more than what is currently available. In a rare moment of unity, global leaders convened a virtual summit to discuss coordinated efforts for recovery. The United Nations Secretary General, Ana Perez, closed the summit with a powerful statement. This is not a time for division. It is a time for humanity to come together, to support one another, and to ensure that no nation is left behind in the struggle to rebuild. Despite these pledges, the challenges ahead are immense. Resources are limited, economies are in turmoil, and millions of people remain displaced. For many, the question isn't when life will return to normal, but whether it ever will. As we reflect on the enormity of this disaster, it's impossible to ignore the resilience and determination of humanity. Stories of survival, bravery, and compassion continue to emerge, reminding us of our capacity to endure even the most unimaginable hardships. In shelters and makeshift communities, people are forging bonds, sharing resources, and finding ways to move forward together. In the words of one survivor from Mexico City, "We've lost so much, but we haven't lost each other. And as long as we have that, we have hope." But even as we look to the future, questions remain. How will we adapt to a world that has been so fundamentally altered? What lessons will we take from this catastrophe? And how will we ensure that we are better prepared for the challenges to come? And perhaps most hauntingly, what other forces may be lying in wait beneath the surface, ready to reshape our world yet again? This is Alex, signing off from VoiceCast. As the dust settles and the earth continues to tremble, one question remains. How do we rebuild from here? And will the planet ever be the same?